Welcome back to another edition, and I am so excited to have a guest, of which I normally don't have guests, most of you know, with me, but I have only really special guests. But this is a really special guest, Sonya Britt-Lutter, who I think is I'm somewhat of certainly a co-founder in the whole financial therapy movement, and one of the people that was in the room when it happened, and so I'm really excited to have Sonya and just have a conversation, because I haven't had many chances to have a conversation with Sonya.
It is really fun to be here, Rick. Although talking on podcasts makes me very nervous, but we're just talking about life and what's been going on and financial therapy. Who doesn't love talking about that?
Exactly. And I'm not the world's best interviewer, but I'm a great talker. So you were just telling me about your South Dakota shirt you've got on.
Yes.
Now,
South Dakota State,
which is important distinction to make, especially in Kansas, when you talk about Kansas State, right?
Yes. Highly different universities when you add the state behind it.
I got myself in all sorts of trouble talking about Kansas University and Kansas State, or the University of Kansas, right?
Yes, or you can call it Kansas University, KU. It all works. Ironically, their colors are red and blue, which we are both wearing at the moment, blue. Not to be confused with Kansas State University, which is the purple school.
That's right. And the Wildcats, correct?
You've got it.
Okay. And you spent a lot of time there.
I did.
How long?
12 years.
Wow.
As an employee, much longer as a student. And yeah, it was a long and windy road, I suppose. Well, let's go all the way to the beginning, shall we?
Yeah.
So I went to K-State, and I thought I was going to be a speech language pathologist. So I thought I was going to specifically be a teacher of hearing impaired children. I had an experience as a child going to a camp with a deaf child, and it was so fascinating to me, and just how authentically she lived her life and how she had a positive spin on everything. I thought, I want to do that and work with more people like that. Turns out you have to know a lot about biology and chemistry and all sorts of other science to be a speech language pathologist. So I was out pretty soon in that. But I found financial planning, and it's the same outcome, right? Where you get to help people and help them live authentically and happy. And I like numbers. So that all worked out great.
So how do you make this jump of, I'm going to be a speech pathologist, and then you discover financial planning?
Believe it or not, those two programs were located in the same building, the same academic building. So I would walk by bulletin boards. This was the old days when there was the paper bulletin boards, and it was advertising financial planning, and how if you liked helping people and you liked numbers, this was a major for you. And I thought, I do like both of those things.
Wow.
Yeah. Otherwise, I never would have found it. I can point exactly where the bulletin board was.
Wow. And in a very crude sense, that was financial therapy.
It was. Yeah. So also located in the same academic building was marriage and family therapy. And that's how I found my way into my master's program in therapy. And that was a fascinating experience. So this was 2003 to 2005. And my colleagues in therapy, it's a bit of a stretch, but they knew essentially nothing about personal finances.
Mhm.
And so they were terrified to have these conversations, particularly with their couple clients. This is not surprisingly a common thing that couples argue about in their relationships. And so they would go to therapy. And my therapy colleagues had no idea what to do with that. Simultaneously, I'm hearing from the people that I graduated with in financial planning who are now out there as financial planners, and them talking about their experiences of their couples arguing or crying in front of them in the office, and they're just at a loss in terms of not knowing what to do. And one of them even went so far as to say he shuts down the meeting and just reschedules it if the clients start getting emotional.
Oh, wow.
I mean, this was a long time ago. I think we've progressed a lot since then, but it was really eye-opening for me to realize how big of a disconnect there was between financial planning and therapy. So that brings us back to the formation of the Financial Therapy Association.
So I just want to be clear. So you got into the financial planning program first.
Yep.
Was that at that time, was that an undergrad program then?
It was an undergraduate degree program. Yeah,
Okay.
one of the first.
And because maybe there was no master's at that time.
We had just at Kansas State had just started the master's program, I think the year that I started my undergrad program. So yes, it was all very new, all happening right at the same time.
And so then when you graduated from that, you went into the MFT program?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And when did you get into the MFT program?
2003.
2003. So you did your financial planning before that, 2003 to 2005, you're in the MFT program.
Yep. And then I worked in the real world for a while, and then I went back to school at Texas Tech.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm connecting some dots for myself because I forget exactly when it is I started working on the book Conscious Finance. I think it was probably 2005, 2006, sometimes in there.
It was. I say that with a fairly high degree of confidence because this was right about the time I met you.
Well, and I'm trying to remember, how did I first hear about you? Because in my mind, you were the first financial therapist.
That's very flattering. I think the first financial therapist was Ted Klontz. Yeah, that's how the idea entered my mind. So it was during my master's program to where one of the projects was to interview somebody who was doing something that you wanted to do. And then I randomly found my way to on-site workshops where you and Ted were leading those workshops. I forget what it was called. Healing Financial Issues. Yes. And
it could have been, I think originally it was the financial integration workshop. And then it morphed to healing financial issues.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's how I found my way to Ted and learning how he worked with you to incorporate some of those financial elements into an experiential therapy experience. And that was so fascinating to me. So then that's when we met, was it there in Nashville at one of those workshops.
So when I think of you as one of the first financial therapists, I put the context around that in that you had formal education in financial planning and you had formal education in therapy, right?
Yeah, I was probably one of the first, or I might have been the first to have that.
And that is my point in that Ted was one of the very first mental health practitioners to wade into the area of financial therapy and putting that together, as I was one of the very first financial planners that waded into the realm of therapy, right? But I didn't have formal training in, I didn't have a master's in mental health counseling or marriage and family therapy. Ted didn't have any training in financial planning. So if you put the two of us together,
You get a Sonya.
I used to, well, I was going to say a whole brain, which is a Sonya.
Yep.
And that was what was so fascinating to me. I remember seeing your name somewhere and that you had those designations of like, it was like, oh my God, there's somebody that's got everything. So yes, and the story that I make up around going to onsite was that I think, see how close I am with this, because I think I was looking for somebody at that time.
You were.
Of course, I was always looking for planners because getting them to move to Rapid City, South Dakota might have been harder than Manhattan, Kansas. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
At least people think there's more snow in Rapid City, South Dakota.
Yeah. You'll need to work on your messaging a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, fortunately now we're virtual, so that's not an issue anymore.
But Storybook Land, that's a really fun hidden secret of Rapid City.
Yeah. Storybook Island.
Storybook Island, yes. Yep.
Right.
Yes.
And it's still there, going strong. So I thought, oh, good. I'm looking for somebody. You're going to onsite. We can do a whole week interview, which we did. And so you mentioned yesterday the taxi cab ride back. That must have been expensive because it seemed like we were in a car, not a van.
I think we were in a car, but now I'm starting to reflect back. Was it a taxi or did somebody just volunteer to take us?
I don't remember, but because
we both remember the ride.
The conversation, and it was, as I remember it, it was in that conversation that we had done Money Egg and the Money Atom and the 3 questions and everything that would be great to do when somebody's in transition and wondering what to do. And what I tell people is that I did such a good job in co-facilitating the workshop that that helped you get really clear that you didn't want to work for me.
Well, that is more or less how I remember it happening too. But the reason why was because that's when I decided I'm going to go get a PhD and do more research in financial therapy. And that's how I ended up at Texas Tech.
Yeah.
That was the moment I decided.
Yep. I remember that. I was excited for you and I was really sad for me.
You need to do worse at your job, I guess.
Oh, man. Yeah, I could launch into a whole nother litany on attracting the type of talent that I look for, which is kind of rare. So you went, so you got your doctorate at Texas Tech in financial planning.
Correct.
Right? And then you accepted a position back at Kansas State, right?
That's right.
And
do you read my CV? Because you're doing an awesome job so far.
No, this is all from memory. I don't prepare for these. I don't prepare for these. But I have followed you. I have followed you very closely, right?
Yep.
And at Kansas State, like you really progressed to even be not only over the financial planning school, but some other schools. Is that right?
Yeah, it was a very confusing department. So I became the program chair for financial planning much earlier than perhaps was recommended by my superiors. But it was a really fantastic experience. And that's really when we started the financial therapy certificate program.
Yeah.
And then I became the department head over financial planning, which also included early childhood education, conflict resolution, marriage and family therapy, family and consumer sciences education, human development and family studies. So it was a really massive department, but also really fantastic in terms of the holistic vision of financial therapy, because it's never just the finances, it's not just the therapy elements. It involves conflict resolution. It also involves a lot of that family and consumer sciences elements of being a good consumer and understanding how things operate. It also includes being a parent with the early childhood education. It also includes development in terms of those key brain developments and relational developments that we all experience. So it was a really fun experience. It was also higher ed administration during COVID, which came with its own set of challenges, and got the department in a really good spot. And then I decided I'm going to do something for me. So that's when I left academia, spent some time in a consulting firm, and then here I am. I started my own business, and I'm going back to academia part-time at Texas Tech University, developing curriculum in financial health and wellness. So that's really fun.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So is that within Sarah Acebeto's
It is.
program?
Yep.
Oh my God. What a
You didn't know
powerhouse.
this. It's brand new.
No, I didn't know this at all.
Surprise.
Okay, so many things to talk about. When you went back to Kansas State, was that during the time that Christy Archuleta was there, John Grable was there, or was that after? Or
Yep, it was the three of us, and then one other instructor who was very solidly in the financial planning space. She was very supportive of us, but she was also a few years from retirement. So she just let the three of us do our thing, and
wow.
we decided to form the Financial Therapy Association.
Wow. So for listeners that don't know, John Grable was, well, all these three were very fundamental in forming the Financial Therapy Association. And then John went to University of Georgia, and Christy followed sometime later.
Mm-hmm.
But that decision to look at forming a Financial Therapy Association, I think that meeting was in 2009, if I remember right. 2008.
Yep.
And we
that
met.
Was the first one in California.
In San Diego? Was that the right
Well,
place?
I don't remember what city. It's one of the Sands, right? San Francisco, San Diego. I don't know.
some place out there.
Santa Rosa.
And the discussion does this financial therapy thing have any legs?
Yeah.
Is it something we should pursue, or is it just a really nice idea that's going to go nowhere?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I remember it.
Yep.
And there were about 30 of us, I think, that were invited to attend. And then the consensus was yes, it's going to be a thing.
Obviously.
That's how I remember it.
Yes.
And we went forward from there. And then I think we formed that then in 2010. Is that right?
I think that's right. Yep.
Yep. And you were the first president of the Financial Therapy Association, right?
Yes. For 3 years in a row. Can you believe that?
Wow.
I'd kind of forgotten about that until I saw the dates a while back. Wow, that was a really long time.
Yeah, I think you are the only 3-year running president in our history.
They probably changed the rules since then.
And term limits.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, and it's been the Wild West with the Financial Therapy Association, right? Mm-hmm. Coming up with I was always amused that early on we came up with a definition of financial therapy. And I don't know if we've changed that or not, but I was like, heck, financial planning's been around for 40 or 50 years and they still can't come up with a definition of what it is.
It was a good effort on our part. I do think they're using the same definition.
Yeah, I think it is. In fact, I just recently I was today talking to my staff whether we should take financial therapy off of our website, because I've gotten very clear that the financial planning firm is very different from the financial therapy firm. And then I talked myself right into a cul-de-sac, because I said, well, technically, if you address the behavior of money and the emotions of money around finance, that's part of the definition of financial therapy.
Right.
So it's such a wide continuum that it's like, yeah, I don't know if you've experienced this, but it's like in a financial therapy session, you can be talking all about the numbers and it can sound like a financial planning session. And then it can go to the other extreme of sounding like a total therapy session, and then everything in between.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's spot on, right? It's always a continuum. And during an hour-long time, you could go from one extreme to the next. Between 1 month to the next month, you could go across the continuum. And yeah. So I think that's one of the challenging parts about the Financial Therapy Association, is getting really clear in terms of, do you want to be on one end or the other? Or do you want to remain flexible in terms of that continuum?
I think that's been just a real bugger in trying to define what is their financial therapy, who is a financial therapist. In my original thinking, I was never a financial therapist because I didn't have a master's in any type of mental health. Just as I would say, any mental health provider that didn't have a CFP or didn't have an undergrad or a master's in financial planning also wasn't a financial therapist. That's why, like, someone like yourself is, to me, the gold standard of being a financial therapist.
I'm going to hire you as my marketing team. Gold stars.
Well, what can I say? Now the Financial Therapy Association has gone away from, which was my original view. I would say I did financial therapy, but only in conjunction with a mental health provider. That together we had both brains in the room, or both have, so we had a full brain. And so they've gone away from needing both of those disciplines. So that's...
Yeah. You know, I've been doing a lot of thinking about this, particularly as the CFP board has come out with the psychology of financial planning, and looking at what those words mean and how are they similar and how are they different. So psychology means the ology, study of the mind, and particularly as it relates to your behaviors and emotions. Therapy, thera, means to treat. And so it is different. Therapy, financial therapy, implies that you are there to treat something. Can a financial planner treat? Probably not, unless you're on that continuum. Are you treating conflict in a situation? Psychology merely implies that you recognize what's going on and that you know how to make a recommendation for treatment. And so I do think that they are very different things, and you could still be on a continuum of that, right? Like, how deep do you study financial planning of the mind and emotions, and how much do you treat? We can all put a Band-Aid on, but we're not all going to suture up some big issue. So definitely still a continuum with both things, but I think we're talking about different things when we're talking psychology of financial planning and financial therapy.
It's fascinating. And you probably remember the times that we said, financial therapy isn't the best word because therapy just means so many things to so many different people, right? And we talked about changing our name to the Financial Psychology Association. And then that had a whole new set of issues. So that makes a ton of sense. Let me make sure I got this. That therapy means treating, and psychology means the recognizing,
right,
not treating. Well, that's brilliant.
It is brilliant, but it opens up a whole new can of worms, right?
Yes, it's not called the therapy of financial planning, which I don't even know if that completely makes sense. But when you said that a financial planner doesn't treat, that makes sense to me. And I especially think of treating trauma,
right?
Which maybe we can talk about. But the psychology of and recognizing the issues of financial planning and like what's happening and when to refer out, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. Just like you listen for keywords of legal issues, right? Like, oh, no, I can't be drafting those contracts for you. Same thing. Mm-hmm. You're just recognizing the keywords, the key signs, and making the necessary treatment referral.
So in that context, the Psychology of Financial Planning, which is the book, which, by the way, full disclosure, Sonya was my editor on the two chapters.
Yeah.
That's right. You were co-editor with 3, but you were pretty kind to me, quite frankly. I have a personal editor who bleeds all over everything I do.
I'm all for authentic writing. You tell the story the way you want to tell it.
Well, the truth be known, I was sending everything I was writing to her first before it got to you.
See, my PhD students are going to disagree with me very adamantly here because I do edit quite heavily in some context. But yours was great.
Well, that's
thanks to your personal editor. Yes.
I have much more that I'd like to chat about, especially like I said, I mentioned trauma, but we're out of time on this particular edition. So I think we'll just continue the conversation for next week.
Great. Thanks, Jack.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And we will see you next week when we continue the conversation with Sonya.